seek and share information, explore identities, offer social support and validation, and perform self and group advocacy. But in these studies, there's typically only a focus on one specific disability, such as fibromyalgia or ALS, or they're only examining one digital setting or one hashtag, and they're typically only relying on content analysis for data collection. So my goal is to broaden my settings and inclusion criteria in order to recruit a wider variety of participants to collect data from via a more direct method, with the assumption that a more holistic pattern of themes mirroring those found in previous studies would emerge. So moving on to my methodology, data collection began in June and lasted through August of this past summer. I interviewed 20 adults through online video conferencing platforms such as the one we're using today, and used a semi-structured interview protocol. To recruit, I relied on passive recruitment and snowball sampling for the flyer shown below. I posted it bi-weekly onto a study-specific Twitter account, and then onto my personal Instagram once a month. And I utilized popular disability-focused hashtags to gain traction. And across the data collection period, I had about 42 folks reach out to me with interest. I'm currently thematically analyzing my interview transcripts, but as of now, I have some preliminary findings on the demographics of my participants. The average age was 29 years, and the majority were US-based, but I did have 3 international participants. In the pie graphs, you can see the percentages of gender identity, sexuality, and racial ethnic identity. And then all but 2 participants disclosed multiple identities, with highest counts being for mental illness disclosure. I would say the strengths of my study were my familiarization with the social climate of online disabled communities, which I had been following influencers and community leaders for months prior to recruitment. I expanded past some harmful medicalized notions of disability. And then for the flexibility of the interview process also helped me gain richer insights into their experiences. And I think overall, despite my short time span and light posting schedule, I was able to quickly recruit participants and thus data. And then to finish up, the major limitations so far have been the exclusion of anybody without access to internet due to financial, geographic restraints, or simply due to lack of accessibility features in certain platforms. There's also great selection bias in that certain people are more compelled to speak up than others regarding their experiences, and because the study lacked compensation. And I think this is why there was such a severe lacking of men, older, and POC participants. So if this methodology would be replicated, I would highly recommend more targeting inclusion of those groups via specific hashtags or reaching out to private groups or community leaders directly. So thank you so much for allowing me to present my work to you today, and I'm open to any questions, comments, or concerns. And sorry for going over slightly.
You're okay. Feel free to, throw a question in the chat. Otherwise, if you want to unmute yourself and just ask it yourself, there's room for that too. Okay, awesome. I guess my question is, so what do you plan on doing after collecting all of this data? How do you plan on using this study?
Yeah, so I'm basically trying to look at all the interview transcript data and see if those themes from previous literature have emerged of sense of community, during any isolation or social support. And then I'm more specifically also looking at activism tendencies, because a lot of folks were discussing, especially in this social political climate, how they're using their online communities to participate in activism. They might be limited due to geographic restriction or, the physicality of spaces. A lot of them were I would have loved to attend some marches and protests, but I simply can't. But through my online activism, I feel like I am included in the discussion and the discourse. So basically that, it's a very exploratory and holistic study.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for presenting. Very cool information. And, you don't see a lot of studies that kind of take into consideration, disabilities and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's awesome to kind of, study that group of people a little bit more and kind of just, yeah, I think this is great. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we can move on to the next person. Are we ready?
I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll go ahead and present. Oops. There we go. Okay, so hi everyone, my name's Madeline. I'm a research assistant at the Center for Community Research at DePaul University, and our presentation will be titled Community Collaboration, Working with Patient Advocates to Better Understand Myalgic Encephalomyelitis and Chronic Fatigue Syndrome, which is a debilitating chronic illness that our lab studies. Just to give a little bit of a background on this illness, it's a very controversial chronic illness because there's no exact disease etiology that's known. There's no biomarker for this illness. And so unfortunately, patients who struggle with ME and CFS have debilitating symptoms such as fatigue, post-exertional malaise, cognitive impairment, and various autonomic symptoms, but are oftentimes brushed aside as this disease being all in their head. In the past, it's been labeled as a somatoform disorder. Just to give a little bit of a background, and I think because this group is so highly stigmatized, one thing that we've noticed is there is a high degree of patient advocate websites out there and organizations, as well as community blog forums for patients to kind of gather and share resources, but also I think for a sense of community. One of our collaborators that we work with runs a very highly trafficked ME and CFS related blog. It's called Health Rising, and he recently made a post detailing the findings of our recent study looking at pediatric ME and CFS, which unfortunately we know way less about. And in this blog posting, he concluded with a short survey for participants to engage in, and those questions were, how old were you when you came down with ME and CFS? And then also please check any of the events that you experienced during childhood prior to the start of your ME and CFS. And that was like, choose all of the above. And what we found was that was kind of jarring was quite a few people believe they became ill much earlier in childhood, which is kind of the opposite of what's out there in the literature. And what we believe is that it tends to affect older children, late in adolescence, and then adults. And so that kind of drew us to look a little bit further into not only this survey, but also the whole slew of comments that this post garnered. And there was upwards of 70 comments, which we then went ahead and analyzed qualitatively. And I'm not going to go super into the results of this qualitative analysis. I have them in a table here, so you guys feel free to look over some of those themes, as well as the viral illnesses, symptoms, and experiences that were endorsed in Table 1. But I think I wanted to go over some of the key takeaways of working collaboratively with this group and this blog community, and the benefits that can come out of that. Namely, survey dissemination and data collection were completed entirely within the ME CFS patient community, which eliminated barriers that are often imposed by perceived power imbalances that often come with, I think, being disbelieved in the healthcare community and with various medical practitioners. It also promotes patient empowerment by giving voice to vulnerable communities, such as this one. But then also this blog-centered method of data collection laid the foundation for community building. It allowed one to share in and develop individual and group experiences. This qualitative analysis really kind of helped us understand patient lived experiences in detail. And it facilitated the data collection simultaneously and across various geographical locations. So we had people answering from all the way in Australia, in the UK, as well as in the US, because it was online. Illness experiences were rooted in the offline world, yet online sharing of experiences increases rate and efficiency of data collection. There were several weaknesses as well, such as we weren't quite sure if blog participants were self-reporting authentic material. There was lack of solidified demographic data, unfortunately, because we analyzed these comments after the fact. And then there were some potential sampling biases there that could have been in question. Are there the more sick patients, maybe in this range of illnesses that are out there, were they drawn to this specific posting, or was it a whole variety of illness severity? And so I think to conclude, we believe that active citizen participation, voluntary organizations, and community development can positively contribute to the advancements of research examining marginalized population. And collaboration between scientists and patient advocate organizations promotes empowerment by bridging the gap between scientists and patient communities, which thus then would challenge federal research initiatives and promoting advantageous policy change. I listed some future directions as well. So just to continue to explore how to best facilitate active collaboration between researchers and patient advocates, and also just to take a look at the role that technology could play in conducting qualitative analysis to vulnerably and functionally impaired patient organizations, especially such as the one we took a look at, who are often unable to they're forced to have a lot of functional limitations that prevent them from getting out there and are kind of contained often. Yeah, so that's our presentation. I welcome any feedback, questions and comments, and thank you so much in advance.
I guess I have one question.
Yeah.
You said you were kind of reaching out to other countries, right? Did you notice, was it like the data that you gathered from Australia, or is that what you intend to do?
No, so actually, so just to clarify, this posting is with the survey, there's 2 survey items, and then we did a qualitative analysis of the comments, and we actually didn't have solidified demographic info. We just had found that a couple participants had mentioned where they were from in the comments, and so we were able to draw conclusions. But that applies, generally to online research. We have patients that are affected all over the world, and so we find that oftentimes they use these forums to gather and share information.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I was wondering like if there was differences in in their symptoms or in their experience of this based on where they're from, because I mean, yeah, just in general, I'm sure like experiences and the way that something is described is different all throughout different areas. So yeah, I was just curious. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. If there are no other questions, I think we can move on to the next person. Thank you so much, Madeline.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have Dr. Vernita. Dr. Vernita Perkins? Am I saying that correctly? Awesome. Great.
Yeah, so I think Lenny's here. Yeah, Dr. Jason, yay!
Oh, sorry.
I think Dr. Jason's gonna begin, right? We'll
sure.
With
Right.
some insights and in our presentation on giving it away, learning about. What's the exact title? Giving it away, disseminating our field through the media.
So there's incredible opportunities with the media and also some severe limitations. So I'm gonna just really talk real briefly, and really interested in hearing some of your reactions and thoughts, particularly after Dr. Perkins has a chance to give some comments too. So, we can write blogs, we can write editorials, we can be interviewed, and this is all different ways of us basically interacting with larger audiences, people who are not in our kind of psychological communities. And I think there's tremendous opportunities for disseminating and giving it away, which is really what our field is about. And it's not that difficult to do that. A number of you who are here have been doing that type work. And it's really very gratifying. It's a lot of fun. Now, let's talk about the dark side. In the topic of MECFS, which Maddie was just talking about, often you'll get interviewed, for example, a story or a reporter will want something from you on, for example, long haulers. That's very popular right now, given that there's so many people that have not recovered from COVID-19. And some people think that that might actually end up being what ME/CFS is. But when they do the stories, the bylines, they often kind of say things like, as well as with ME/CFS, they say, fatigue is common. Or in a pediatric prevalence study where we found 0.7% of people in Chicago had this illness in pediatric area, you know, after calling 10,000 people in a basic epidemiology study, of which over 90% were never diagnosed. And, you know, so it's so really interesting stuff, but they'll say fatigue is common or chronic fatigue is common. Those terms, or chronic fatigue syndrome is common. Once you kind of have a byline like that, you'll have the patient community react very negatively because they don't like the term chronic fatigue syndrome. They like the term myalgic encephalomyelitis because what you call something really does matter. And chronic fatigue syndrome and fatigue, while it's a very common symptom, it's differentiated from something as severe as ME/CFS, where a number of people can't get out of their home or can't get out of their bed, at least 25%. So when we do this stuff with the media, we can, by our own actions or by the reporter's actions, end up further stigmatizing a very, a group that has been not well treated by our healthcare system or other types of systems. So I'll stop there, turn things over, but just wanted to throw a couple ideas out there.
And then I just wanted to, we're going to quickly turn this over to being as interactive and experiential as possible. We wanted everybody to have a chance to really discuss this topic. So what I want to talk about too, following Dr. Jason's recognition of how we language things and how we present, and maintaining this understanding that we're doing all this scholarly work, we're doing this research, we're doing this studies, we're also doing conferences, and we need to make sure that we continue to translate that information to the public. And so right now, within the field of psychology in general, there's a giant awareness and a push to make sure that the work that we're doing gets translated to the public. We see now with the pandemic exactly why that's necessary, because there's been so much misinformation because we haven't been able to properly disseminate that information to the public. So using the op-eds, using our research, not everyone has access to the journals as we well know, but sometimes I think we forget. So we have to find these public spaces using the media and legitimate media, right, to disseminate this information. So I want to throw out some ideas to you guys about choosing topics, finding the connection between your passion, your research, your study, and how to implement that and how to disseminate that to the public. And so we'll open it up now to just general questions. And we kind of, let's like make this a dialogue, like a group dialogue. So if we can imagine ourselves sitting in a room in a big circle, right? Remember those days? And just feel comfortable opening your mic. I mean, if you feel like you need to type it in the chat, feel free to. And I think Barbara's going to help us with that. Yes, disseminating the questions out of there. But please just open your mics and talk to us, and let's have a conversation about how we get this information.
Yeah. If you guys want to check out your right-hand side, on top it says either presenter view or gallery view. If you click on gallery view, you're able to see more of the people that are in the meeting. So that could be a little bit, more inclusive.
Yeah, go ahead and feel comfortable chiming in, or I'll start talking again, and I know you don't want to hear me.
I guess, and maybe Chris can back me up here. In some of our conversations, some of these, especially the way that media can often cover our research can be really, really stigmatizing, as you mentioned, Lenny. I know, we do research with online communities, and particularly with like the fighting game community. And so that's folks who play like Mortal Kombat and Tekken and stuff like that, Super Smash Brothers. And in the media and in a lot of psychological research for the last 20, 30 years, like these communities have been really, really stigmatized as being overly violent or, you know, misogynistic or live in their parents' basement and all this kind of stuff. And that's particularly hit the fighting game community pretty hard because it's very racially diverse. And a lot of their top players are Black men. So you have this stereotype about Black men being violent and hateful and everything else, and then you have the stereotype about gamers being violent and hateful and everything else, and so those two things combine to particularly hit this community hard. And then it can lead to them not trusting researchers when they want to come in and to study their communities. So I guess I just wanted to kind of add to that idea that like it really is important to, you know, not only be careful when you're talking to the media, to be, you know, really, really clear. And then it's hard because they don't often fact check with you before they publish necessarily. But also just kind of recognizing that when you're starting a relationship with a new community, that there may be that history of that negative experience with the media. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So just to add real quickly to that, you can ask for people who have interviewed you to kind of see the transcripts before they publish it. I would say 80% of the time they won't do it. They basically say, you know, we can't. But sometimes they do. So if they're willing to do that, that's great because you can really help them get it right. However, even if they let you do that, the people who write the bylines are a different group and you have no control over that. So sometimes the bylines are going to be incredibly stigmatizing when the story is good, and the combination of them actually leads to bad things.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you know, obviously because they're more media oriented than people, mental processes and behavior oriented as we psychologists are, they're looking for the hook. They're looking for that thing that's going to get, it's kind of the clickbait thing, kind of, right? So they're looking for that. So Dr. Jason and I have found that that the substance of our articles really needs to be meaningful and really needs to be able to like counter that and make that human connection. So we're looking for that human connection in the content that we write.
So on the, go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead, Lenny. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that there are times when they get it so bad that, you know, patients start contacting me. I say, I don't know what to do, but let's contact the reporter. So we, in combination, they and I sometimes get through to a person who has done really bad stuff. Unintentionally, but they just got it so poorly that they end up victimizing the people they're talking about. And there have been times when we've been able to get stories to get changed, even when they're, you know, because particularly on the online community. So don't stop. If you feel like you've been ripped off and you feel like bad has occurred and further stigma has occurred, you can do something.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to share as well. Yeah, that is the other side of the media, but in being inclusive, I guess you could say, or in us really thinking about using the media as well for the good, right? You absolutely, I cannot say enough about the other side of the media, but I guess I look at it more though, or at least I'm fascinated more about their ability to persuade, their ability to influence public attitudes and perception. And so, you know, I think there is a way that we want to think about crafting, right, and creating, like Dr. Perkins shared, in terms of humanizing, you know, people, et cetera. But so the way, and this probably falls into media framing, you know, they have their way. And I'm thinking about a couple of things, and I'll share. I mean, I certainly don't want to monopolize this conversation, but it is important. I was doing a paper on public housing in Chicago, and what was very interesting is the way the media can bring a community, the way a media can, one, demolish a community basically. And I'm thinking about Cabrini Green in Chicago in particular, and how, you know, even before the structures were demolished, they began a campaign of what the community was going to look like in the media prior to the demolishment. And so when you have captions and pictures and language, for example, the renderings of how the community was going to look was already in the papers, and they were already calling it Newtown versus Cabrini Green. And so they didn't show any of the mom and pop stores that were historically there, but they showed these slick renderings of how the community was going to look, you know, after, you know, getting rid of the, in their eyes, you know, the bad, you know, and so how they, I'm just fascinated by how they frame information from who, you know, selected individuals and whoever they wanted to, and how that sways, I think, overall, again, public attitude and public opinion. So we cannot forget that in disseminating the information on CP, you know, to the how important framing what we want to say is, and intentional, right? To get this type of widespread, you know, this widespread dissemination, right, of what we're talking about. So that's kind of the example. I hope that gives some context. You know, it's much larger than that, because this was around Chicago's plan for transformation in terms of that whole spectrum of demolishing public housing structures. So, you know, there's a much larger context, but I think it applies. Yep.
And Dr. Prabhar, I was gonna add in there, part of what Dr. Jason and I have found is to find the forum where you're more in charge of how the content is disseminated, right? So in forums where there's going to be less hands on it, when your content, where your articles, when your blogs, when your information is complete, so that it stays more intact. Yes. So that's another approach to choosing, you know, forums where that can happen, and where
they're for your cause, basically.
Right,
you know,
right,
they'll
right.
push your cause just the way it is, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Where they're more, they are more open to like accepting the content and or understand what your mission is or what you're trying to explain.
And they'll push it for
making
you.
Sure that's science, because you know we really want evidence-based, and I always like to say indigenous science as well, right? So we want to do that, and I'm you know, sometimes the media isn't totally ready for that because they're still trying to sensationalize our science.
And again, still depends, I think, on how it's framed. You know, if you can use research to reach their audience, who they think is going to read it, because actually, I'm thinking about the Atlantic. Well, they have a affinity, or you know, they have some relationship. I'm thinking about Ta-Nehisi Coates for one of them, you know, who writes for the Atlantic, and then the other one, Kendi, has gotten a great article in the Atlantic on COVID-19 and the African American community. So you know, some parts of so one is who the source is, building that relationship with a ally, I think helps. And then two, again, you know, thinking through even how we take the most mundane of research, or the most, you know, scientific, you know, over the top, and put it in a different way, I think is helpful, because they're just so monumental in the spread, right? I mean, you know, it's virtual basically, you know, if we talk about being online, something popping off, you know, something that heavy, right? You know, with millions of people that quick, you can't ignore the, you know, the ability that they have to, you know, turn something around in a split second and pass on, you know, information.
And that's where it comes universalizing the information too. So like you keep saying today, humanizing. And when you humanize that content, it's a lot less easy to weaponize it or monetize it, right?
And ignore
we're talking about things that
that's
matter.
right. And ignore
they're not going there. So
that's right.
that's one of the other tools too, is
Mm-hmm.
to really humanize and universalize that content. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. A lot easier to ignore an object,
mm-hmm.
right, than
so
it is a person.
So everyone, please join in. Please feel free, you know, sharing based on what Dr. Palmer is saying, and any questions you have, if you're interested in publishing or trying to get your information out there.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my interests is food and housing insecurity. And so we're working with a number of partners through Kumu who have different subgroups. And one of the groups is specifically focusing on communication. How do you disseminate information to those communities who perhaps don't have access to that information? I know there's probably not like one answer, but maybe in your experiences, since you both have worked in this arena for a while, how have you overcome those barriers where even if the information is present, how do you break the barrier of accessibility?
Well, I'll speak to that, and then I'll pass to Dr. Jason to add. Access is something big important. So we have like 2 points of access, right? Like actually being able to access the information, and then making sure that the information that's disseminated is accessible, right? And in both of those areas, we've seen some movement, and I've actually just started reaching out and working together with some groups that are actually focused on recognizing that anytime we have content, it needs to be accessible in many different formats. So that's for low vision and blind, and then for deaf and any kind of hearing communities. And that's a huge spectrum, right? From people who have all different kinds of accessibility interests, let's say, because I don't like to call it challenges or problems. And in that, there's a lot of cross section, because at different times, all of us can use those tools. So I was in a webinar last week, and I was realizing that there are different times where many people are on screens too much. And so we're beginning to understand some of more of the vision challenges, right, that other people face. So it's doing that. And then it's also finding those forums where they're receptive to a wider audience, an audience of, you know, where they're trying to be diverse and inclusive, right? And so I'm going to pass to Dr. Jason.
Got to remember to get that mute thing off. So I think to me, the interesting piece is that the groups that I often work with, and I work with people in recovery homes. I work with people with this disease called ME/CFS. They often don't have access to information through multiple media. They don't have access to things that are going on at the policy level. They're often kind of bereft of the most critical stuff that they need to know what's happening with their lives. And sometimes, because of my associations, I have sometimes get information leaked to me. So I might have information that nobody else has. And then how do I get that information out so that people can make a difference, at the same time keeping in confidence some of the information that I've got in terms of confidentiality. So yeah, as we work with the media, and as we basically try to work with groups that have been oppressed, we often have information, and how to get that out is really a struggle to do it in an effective way.
I was also going to add in here about choosing topics. So I know sometimes we have our research that we're passionate about. In the world of op-eds, it's obviously really important to know what's trending, what's going on out there. So I think it helps to be in forums like this. That helps our writing and our publishing to be in forums where you're on the pulse of what's happening in the world, those questions. So I think the why is such a great question, and it's something that we're discouraged to ask in our society a lot, right? They're like, don't ask why. But asking why around your research, why does it matter, who can it help, will help you also find outlets to share your information. And I promise you, if you're passionate about doing it, if you're passionate about your research, if you're passionate about your study, if you find yourself constantly revisiting certain topics, we need to know about it in the public, because we're still public. We're scholars, we're practitioners, but we're also the public, and we need to know. And I put this out to you, how many times you might find you stumble upon an article that really touches you, or that someone is actually doing research that's really important to you. We're looking for that from your research too. So we need people to take a look at it, look at those topics. I say bounce it off of colleagues and practitioners, bounce it off of students and people in your networks, and find out the interest. But I promise you, if it's something you're passionate about, we need to know about it. And there's a lot of spaces now that are asking for this scholarly information, asking for evidence-based information, indigenous methodologies, right? So I'm gonna hush for a minute, let y'all process and ask questions.
So one of my experiences in writing op-eds is that they actually have pulled for very negative information. So as a community psychologist who is often, sort of trying to present a strengths-based approach, that's not what sells. That's not what they think will grab people. So it's like, so, you might be able to embed it in there, but they want the splashy, like, this is why this is a problem. And they want it to be startling and capture attention. And so, I think some of it, it's like sort of a struggle to say the message that you want to say, but then also have it picked up by the outlet that wants to, that you're sort of potentially interested in putting it out there. And the other thing that I thought has been interesting was is like the comments. Actually, it's like you sort of have to, whether you're going to turn that on, because I published one piece where I had like 400 comments within a couple of hours. And people are ranting in there about it. It's like, who are these people who like, who are watching? Like they're obviously just kind of like watching for material to come out so that their post gets up there first, so that it's like then read through, and it's often very negative. So at least it was with some of the things that not towards me or thing, but about the issues that I was kind of writing about. So anyway, it's been kind of an interesting experience to do this.
And just to add that, those great comments, by the way, there's risks to us. If we don't play by the rules, there really are rules out there. And if you violate those rules, we can have some consequences. There's rules about what we can post on Scra. You can't say certain things. And if you do, you will get consequences. And there's rules in everything. That's just an example. And sometimes because of our research, because we sort of are a little bit risk takers in terms of some of the stuff we're pursuing, we can have the people who we work with have negative reactions to our work. And I think we have to recognize that too. Quick story. When I came up for tenure at DePaul a number of years ago, the day I was interviewed by the president and the committee on tenure, I happened to have an article come out, the front page of the Sun-Times, saying I had looked at advertising sources and whether they were racist, sexist, on and all the other isms, and found out that advertising was really pretty bad in terms of the images they were portraying to the public. And the president started the meeting by taking the paper, the Sun Times, throwing it on the table and saying, how's this related to psychology? And that was a tough question. Fortunately, I got through that. But he wasn't happy that I was insulting all his funders.
Well, and I think that's we're there. I want to go back to what Dr. Palmer was mentioning about just really understanding what our role is in community scholarship and practice, and having to push past that. I think it's time really to take the Titanic off the iceberg, and so I think it's important for us to work with our collaborations and to continue to push past the media, because this is one of the problems, at least from my perspective, this year, that we just haven't had enough good information, and then to find out that there's a lot of information in the science communities that we're not sharing. So we've just built these walls around ourselves to keep our information inside. And in a few conversations I've had recently, other scientists have said, well, we're very cautious. We don't just put our information out there. We test it, and we peer review, and we make, we work very rigorously to present, factual information. But at the same time, even when we have information that is moving the conversation in a direction, we should still consider putting it out there to have the discussion, and not assume that the public, and the general public in particular, is not intelligent enough to begin to have these dialogues, right? So so I feel like it really we do have to kind of put a little armor on, perhaps, and maybe see it a little bit like going into battle, but still pushing through it, because people need these conversations. We desperately need them. And then I'll add another drop in there about reframing the language, right? It's our honor and our duty to change the traumatizing and historically traumatizing language.
Yes, I agree, because the world won't know, for example, the turn, and I'll say the decolonial turn, in any discipline that should be turning. All of them should be, from Eurocentric viewpoints or Eurocentric lens. The world won't know that it's turned unless you tell them it's turned, right? And so that's, recruitment of students, anything that you could think of that you are interested in having the world know about your discipline. Practice is significant. That's a huge matter, and what social changes are taking place within the discipline that you don't know until, or the world won't know. And so, to Lenny's point, I get it about there are rules, and we do know they are, and sadly there are repercussions, I would imagine, around them. But I guess that's when for example, Dr. Jason mentioned SCRAW and and we're talking about the media, but in my mind, then that means there should be some effort to decolonize both of them, right? SCRAW and the media. Now, what happens with that, I'm not, I never try to really get over there, like I think you said earlier, Dr. Jason or Lenny, around, but don't not do it, right? But but don't not do it. And so you never know the impact. Yeah.
Hi, so I just want to give a 3-minute warning. If you guys want to go ahead and wrap up the conversation, or if you guys have any last questions or comments, Dr. Jason, if you can share your article or the website where they can find your article about the media, that would be awesome. Oh, you already shared it. Just kidding.
So I'll just say, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to continue this conversation. I know there's so much going on today that it's a lot to process. So feel free to, if you have questions afterwards, post conference, to reach out. And I'll pass to Dr. Jason.
Yeah, this is delightful. And I'm just, it's so great to see so many people interested in thinking about how do we get our word out? How do we kind of talk to other people? And one of the most fun things for me is sometimes when I get reactions of people who are really kind of totally different ideology, you know, from something that has been like in a Tribune piece. I got some really interesting people that contacted me and talked to me, and I had a dialogue with some pretty right-wing folks who had very different ways of thinking about the world. But it was incredibly constructive because I don't often get a chance to talk to them and try to share, you know, that we have areas that we agree on and areas we disagree on. And actually, that was a lot of fun.
And I'll button it up with saying that to Susan too, that I think the comments are what they wanted. That 400 comments is exciting to the outlet, the media outlet, but it's also then again another opportunity, I think, to build on that for future articles as well. So, and again, thank you everyone for participating. We really appreciate it and appreciate all the comments and lots of food for thought.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for this roundtable and for bringing this topic up. I don't hear this much in conversation, so about the media. So I think it's very important, especially as, you know, we begin to publish and begin to put our research out there. I do want to ask if presenters can put their name and their contact information down there in case anybody does have any questions. They're able to get a hold of you or contact you through email or social media, whichever you prefer. Make sure you add your name so we know exactly who is whose contact information we're getting. And thank you all. We do have a 10-minute break before the next block. You have conference 1 and conference room 2 where you guys can go and check out those presentations. And then we also have the main room. If you do have any burning questions about logistics, you can go over there, and or if you just want to socialize, that's an open space for you all to kind of keep chatting and keep the conversation going. So thank you for joining us for this block, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate it very much.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, Lenny.
Hey, Barbara. It's Rick.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I'm trying to look for the PowerPoint for this. So I'm like frantically looking through all my open tabs. Hi, how did, I actually didn't even get your message about not coming into the room.
No, don't worry about it. I think I was using the old link anyways, so.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you were able to get in here. Let me see if I can find the folder again, because I just clicked out of everything. Tyler, what would you like to do this time? Do you want to kind of stick to doing the same, or?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe for the next one, do the same thing again. So it ends at 50 minutes every time, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So we want to make sure that we give oral presentations 15 minutes, poster presentations 5 minutes, and then roundtable discussions are 30 minutes. And that's all in the thing. Yeah, and it should be like 50-minute blocks, I believe.
Okay, I was a little unsure because with the oral presentation going a little shorter, I just wasn't sure how to adjust with that. But okay.
Yeah, if we get done earlier than expected, that's great too. So let me see if I can pull up.
Do y'all want me to do anything?
Rick, do you want to moderate it this time? Do you want to be the one that kind of introduces people and does the questions? It's up to you if you would want to do that. Just so I can.
I can tell that I'm fading. I was up till 3 dealing with computer issues.
No.
Well, my personal computer died, so I had to get everything from my phone to my work computer, which technically I'm not supposed to be using.
I mean, I can always take over too if you feel like you kind of just need a break from all the screen and everything.
No, you deserve
I have
a break
question
too.
for Barbara and Rick. That new picture that's on the flyer that looks a lot like Mount Whitney, California, Eastern Sierras. Does anybody know that particular mountain there?
No.
That's the,
Beautiful.
I think that's the old river. Yeah, we've been there. Climbed it actually.
Yeah, that's the mountain you were telling me about in California. Peak?
That's the peak, yeah. That's where I proposed to my wife.
Oh, cute. I love that.
Yeah. And come here and look at this, will you?
Tyler, you can stop recording. I don't know if you're still recording or not. That way it's not too long of a video.
Oh, yeah. Okay.